Welcome to the OhioRAAM Show, number 273.
Again, it's Lee Kreider here with the OhioRAAM Show, a show that explores the ultra in UltraCycling. And on today's show, we're going to go to Iowa and talk with Heather Poskevich. Many of you will remember that Heather appeared at the Hoodoo 500. No one had ever seen her before at an UltraCycling road race. To the surprise of everyone, she won the entire race overall over men and women. We shouldn't be surprised when we learn more about Heather. She has a background in gravel racing. Be sure to check the show notes. You'll find them right here below the video on the OhioRAAMshow.com website. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see a link there in the description box, which will take you to the website and the show notes. And we come to you because of all the good people who work night and day at time stations 41 in Oxford, 42 in Blanchester, and 43 in Chillicothe. These are time stations in the race across America. And with that, let's just get on and talk to Heather. Heather, you exploded onto our radar, and exploded is the word for it, when we showed up at Hoodoo 500, and I'm thinking, who is this woman? And I think a lot of other people thought the same thing. Well, you've been around a while, I find out, but just tell me a little bit about yourself so we can get acquainted with you.
Well, I'm a late bloomer to the sport, as you saw. Actually, I didn't really start cycling seriously until 2015. I'm an emergency medicine physician on the side, and biking has become
on the side.
Yeah, right. Well, it gets in the way of my biking and vice versa. So.
Yes, well, work has a way of doing that, doesn't it, Heather?
Absolutely. I mean, my emergency medicine is actually a good lifestyle, I think, for UltraCycling in a way, because we work all over the map as far as shift work and hours. And so, riding at ridiculous hours is not abnormal for me because I work at ridiculous hours.
Not that unusual. And having had a number of visits to the ER, myself, as well as my wife and family, we appreciate what you people do. You never know what's going to walk in the door, do you?
No, not really.
So what prompted you to get involved in such a crazy idea as riding a bike?
Well, I did it mainly for weight loss. I had got to a point in my life where I just wasn't really physically happy with where I was. And my husband and I, we moved back here to Iowa, and we actually live close to a bike trail. So he said, well, why don't you get a road bike and see if you enjoy that? Because we rode bikes together, but I had a mountain bike and I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know how to shift gears. I couldn't ride very far. 20 miles was a long ways for me. So then I got the road bike and just kind of went from there. It was amazing how much faster I got. And then I realized how fun it was. And I saw all these other people passing me on the trail and thought, gosh, that would be really amazing to ride like they do. So I just kept at it every day and got the weight off that I wanted to get off, and realized even when I had the weight on, I was halfway strong at it, and maybe this is something I'd actually excel at. Well, the adventure of it, I'm born and raised in Montana, and I've spent my entire life looking for the road less traveled. I love that feeling of adventure. You just don't want things to end. You go out for a day and you want to spend the whole day soaking up the sights and enjoying the experience. And so for me, riding for an hour or two was great. But then, I just got hungry for more. I want to be out there longer. I want to see more stuff.
Having ridden across Montana, I can say that 100 miles doesn't get you anywhere.
Exactly. So you see how you want to go further.
Well, anyhow, I don't want to get into road stories. For me, it's about you, but I have a few from Montana. At any rate, so you moved into longer distances, and when did racing seem to catch fire with you?
Same. I kind of went in like both feet just took the plunge. Why start small when you can really go big? But I'd watched some friends doing cycling events, and my first event was like a training ride with a friend. So I didn't technically count that as a race, although it was paid for race event. Racing with those guys were really how I was inspired to try and start my racing career. And then it just so happened, I'd been hearing talk about Gravel Worlds, which is a very popular gravel race in Lincoln, Nebraska. And my family and I were traveling there anyway because our family lives in Omaha, and we were going to watch the solar eclipse in 2017. And that same weekend was Gravel Worlds. So I'd been training for a triple bypass earlier in the year. Unfortunately, it was canceled. I had fitness and thought, well, I'll give it a go and see if I can finish this thing. So that was my first ultra.
So you jumped into gravel right off the bat, correct?
I did. I actually, from friends around here, I had been advised to try gravel because Iowa gravel roads are very hilly, contrary to popular belief. And I was training for triple bypass, and I needed to really practice elevation climbing over and over and over again. So I got a gravel bike so I could really hit those back roads and do hill climbing.
Okay. And you've done some other gravel, haven't you?
All gravel until hoodoo.
All gravel up until hoodoo, right?
Correct. Yep.
So what prompted you to move from gravel into trying something like hoodoo?
There were lots of pieces to this one. And it's just such a special race because of all the pieces that finally came together for me. Like I said, I actually started on bike trails. So I was on a road bike. I was on pavement. I didn't actually venture on too many roads at that time. And for me, I was looking for a challenge as far as scenery. St. George, Utah is kind of near and dear to my heart because, again, while I was going through this weight loss process, Iowa is similarly, Midwestern cold. It's hard to get on a bike, certainly a road bike in the middle of the winter. So I spent a lot of time on a trainer down in the basement on the winter, and I would ride to the half Ironman video of the St. George Triathlon. So I kind of fell in love with that area and thought someday I would like to race that area as kind of a celebration of having spent so much time watching this video and enjoying the scenery and try pavement.
You've had some experience on the road, and then read your blog about this. And by the way, in the show notes, there'll be a link to her blog describing Hoodoo 500. It is quite interesting. She goes into great detail, and I think maybe people who are just getting into UltraCycling might pay attention to it because there was some lessons to be learned there. Had you had any time, you got a time trial, you borrowed a time trial bike, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And how much time had you had on a time trial before Hoodoo?
Just this summer. I borrowed the bike early in the late spring, early summer months. I mean, I did spend hours and hours on the thing. I think I logged close to 900 miles before the race. So okay. I was comfortable with it, but it was this season that was the first time I'd ever been on one. And
you had a little problem with that, didn't you? On the Hoodoo.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. It's not funny, but
well, I can laugh.
Everybody has to learn time trials.
Absolutely. I mean, I can learn about it was a lesson learned. And you could try and chalk some of it up to the bike, but it could have just as well happened to me on my road bike because the whole scenario was just silly. Unfortunately, while I was riding, it was hot that day and we were trying to be very proactive about staying cool. And I had a cooling towel around my neck and I tried to grab it with my hands, with my right hand, which is not really my dominant hand on the bike. And I was hanging on to the left hand of the handlebar and the towel didn't come off. I was going at a slow rate of speed and I thought, gosh, I'll just tug a little harder and throw this thing on the road. My crew knew what we were doing. We were communicating through the headset. And when I gave it a second tug, unfortunately, I pulled too hard on the handlebar on the left side of the bike, which again could happen on the road bike just as well. And I jackknifed the bars is the best I can ascertain. Unfortunately, I knocked myself out. I was unconscious for a minute, maybe a minute and a half per the crew. They said that, I mean, it was seconds before I went down and they actually saw me. The next thing I actually recall was standing next to the bike and they were telling me I had
Okay.
wrecked. And
That happened how far into the race, you know?
yeah, I was at mile 89 out of 512 miles.
Auspicious start, huh?
Right.
Well, I tell everybody you ought to go read her blog about this because it is interesting. Her various moods and experiences along the road. When did you realize that maybe you had a chance to win this thing?
In truth, I went into the race with a hope of being able to be a top performer, at least from the female aspect of the field. I wasn't quite as well versed in the accomplishments of my competition with the male colleagues as well. I went into it thinking there was a possibility I could win. And even after the wreck, I'd lost time. I knew that, but I was keeping up well. And as well as I was performing early in the race, if I could recoup some of my losses, I still felt it's a very long event and there was always potential to make some pretty big gains. So I didn't ever lose faith entirely. I know I said in the report that, I wanted to finish, and that was the understanding, is that was my primary goal. This was a new event for me, a new thing to try. I had crew that were counting on me and supporting me as well. And so I wanted to make it happen for all of us. But I hadn't given up hope that we could really do well.
And you played a little cat and mouse with Shauna Hogan, didn't you? I mean, wasn't there a little back and forth there?
Yeah, yes, there was. That was fantastic, actually. That was probably one of the best parts of the race for me.
I made a note of it here. Let me refer to my notes. It said, Shauna passed with authority.
She did. Oh, my goodness. In the middle of the night.
That is such a beautiful description. With authority. That is a perfect description of how she rides, whether she's going fast, slow, or what have you.
Absolutely. And I think that's a fantastic aspect for any racer to have. I mean, when you're coming up to your competition, especially something like this, you don't want to show any weakness. And she rolled by and I was like, I'm in trouble. she's flying. I better get my stuff together.
But I think you may have learned, Shauna's strategy is, I'm going to ride my race. I don't care what you do. That seems to be an experience that some people find it hard to learn in UltraCycling. Did you have moments when you wanted to really go after it, or did you kind of ride your race, keep your pace?
A little of both, but largely it is about riding your own race. I mean, I went into this having data and understanding what my limitations would be and where I would shine. And, you can't go too hard trying to catch somebody because you're going to burn yourself out long before the event is done. So, you just have to, if you're going to make a strategic move, you have to make sure that you can follow through and that you've left enough in the tank to do what you got to do to finish the event.
Do what you do. Do you follow your power? You have power meters. You follow them very well?
Yeah, I do. I have power meters on pretty much all the bikes at this point, and I do use them.
It sounds like you had a wonderful experience. And like I say, you exploded out of nowhere and everybody wondered where this woman had come from. And I shouldn't say nobody had heard of her before, but let's be frank, your name wasn't well known in UltraCycling circles. And still you come up and you win it over all, men, women, and children. What are you going to do with this newfound glory, Heather?
That's still in the works. I'm loving the experience. I absolutely loved the road and crude experience. So, I'm still working on some plans, as far as what the next season is going to bring, but I anticipate doing some more, ultra pavement and possibly crude events as well. So
you like the crude events?
I did. I mean, I love both. Like, I've up to this point, I've actually done only unsupported events, and they're a lot of fun too. They have their own set of challenges. Having a crew behind you with everything you could possibly want and need, and having that moral support and people to talk you through the tough times is definitely enjoyable. And it gives you a different aspect of cycling, that instead of having to stop and think about your nutrition. I'm constantly keeping track of my calories when I'm by myself, and mindful of weather and clothing changes. All that goes away. They take care of all that for you. You tell them, I'm hot, I'm cold, I'm thirsty, I'm hungry.
Yeah. Not everybody can give up that control.
Yeah, it was hard. Actually, it was kind of hard, again, for all of us. This was a new experience for all of us. Thankfully, we're all friends and we all have cycled together before this anyway. So we all kind of know each other and how we perform. And so, it was a little hard for me to actually relinquish control. And I constantly was checking back with them, my own mental babysitting of, am I on okay with my calories?
Yeah,
Is this okay?
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Well, so we're going to see you again, I hope.
Absolutely.
On some leaderboard somewhere.
I hope so.
Heather, in your blog post, you said you learned 3 things. Is that 3? Yeah, 1, 2, 3. 3 fingers there. You learned 3 things from this race. What were they?
Well, first was not to wreck. I mean, I'm going to have to refer to my notes at this rate. Not to wreck, because it really hurts. And I'll still stand behind that one. Big thing was also about staying positive, because there's times, when the going gets rough, and wasting mental headspace being negative does not do you any favors. And I tell myself this every time, and somehow I still manage to go down that rabbit hole. And probably the biggest and most important one that I learned was change your shorts.
Well, sometimes those basic things are important. Hey, Heather, thank you for being with us. And we wish you well. We hope to see you again. And we'll want you to stay in touch with us, because it's always exciting to see some new name appear on the UltraCycling scene, because we need new blood all the time. Heather, thank you for being with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to share the story. So anytime.
Okay, very good.
Music by Kevin MacLeod.